Backpack Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Grisancic, and this podcast is all about camping, four-wheel drive, and adventuring. I've been out there adventuring, whether it be with my family and the kids, or by myself with my mates for a fair amount of years, and I've got a pretty good amount of experience between me, my friends, and so on that I wanted to share my experiences, reviews, advice, and tips for everybody else to get out there and a bit more inspired to get out in the outdoors a bit sooner rather than later, and not to be cooped up with wondering what do I need, how much I need to spend, and realizing that you can do it with the basics essentials without having to spend that much money and actually still have a good time. Like once upon a time, you see a lot of people on the YouTube out there with the most sophisticated things and influencers and whatnot, but really everybody did start in the back of a car with a tent and an esky and the basics and still had a great time. I remember my first trip, my dad and I went out in his VN Commodore and we filled up the car, went for a couple of days, had an awesome time with the old Coleman Foreman tent and, a stove, gas bottle and an esky, and you make the most of it with whatever you got. And that brings up to my first episode. I had a list of the top 5 things to have in your camping kit, whether you're going solo with your friends or with your family. Something just to keep in the garage in a box that you can transfer between 2 different trips, whether you go in your camper trailer, tent, swag, whatever, how your method is. These are the 5 essential items that I keep in a box for all the trips, and what's worked between the 2. Obviously, add more when you go with the family, and have less when you go with your friends, depending on what you're sharing and whatnot. So I thought I'd start off with the number 1 thing, and not in any particular order, was my stove and cooking equipment, my pots, pan. I've got a 2-burner stove with a gas bottle. I've used the propane bottles that come with the Coleman stove. I found that's been really easy to travel with, and it's been powerful enough to cook in the wind, and quick enough to boil some water for pasta for the kids, or cook some eggs and bacon with the pan and whatnot. So that's probably been one of my essential things, along with your tongs, a good set of long tongs. I definitely would recommend a pair of welding gloves. $10 at Bunnings. You can pick up things hot, not burn your hands, especially in emergency. You don't have to worry about holding tea towels over the fire. Welding gloves will help you in those quick instances that you require the attention. Including your spray oils and whatnot. They're extremely handy items that you can use while camping. You always need to cook food when you're away. You can't exactly, if you're remote, definitely you need to make sure that that you got your stuff cooked and you make your coffee. I think that's probably one of the main essential items that you can have. On that, the second one I can think of is your water jerry cans. Especially if you've got a fire going, you definitely need to at least carry, I'd say, 20 litres per water per day for a family of 4. I found that's worked for myself with my kids when we washed our hands, cooking food, putting out fires, using the chem toilet. That's been quite handy, and a 20 litre jerry can you can buy from Aussie Disposals, Bunnings for about $20 or so. It really helps. I would definitely go a UV protected one, so at least what's in the sun, that when you're storing it in the sun, it's not going to break down in the weather. You don't want any chemicals or any crappy taste in your water. And to clean that, I usually use some of those sanitizing tablets you use for baby bottles when they get a bit yuck with the formula or breast milk and whatnot. I throw one of those tablets in the jerry can every couple of times just to get that manky taste out, disinfect it, and you got clean water for the next trip you go. Especially when you're turning up the site, you got to put out. Some people don't put out their fires when they leave, and at least you got some water as an emergency to put on that fireplace just in case it is hot. Because the last thing you want is your kids get all excited getting out of the car, walking over that fire pit, possibly thongs or no shoes, and you're ending up with burnt feet. Not everybody's responsible when they go camping, and you got to endeavour to try your best to protect your family. So yeah, about 20 litres of water a day is pretty handy. You can have a tap on the jerry can, or you can make a contraption hose with some of the components you can get from Bunnings. I've actually made one with a hose that goes from the back of my car to the outside with the tap. I'll share the link on how to make that on an upcoming post on social medias, and I'll share the links at the end of the show. My third one is your sleeping gear. So you got your swag, your tent, your mattress, sleeping bags. That's also, you can include your camp furniture, so like your chairs, your table, and like a picnic table set that folds up. You can throw in the car, on the roof, or in the trailer. I guess sleeping gear and camping furniture is, I call it a combination in a sense, because really it's all a major, pretty big requirement when you go away. I say camp chairs, like a fold up camp chair to sit down while you're having a meal, or sitting by the fire, or just sitting down at a pit stop. One for you, and one for the kids, and one for your partner if she goes. I've got a couple for the kids, and they sit down in their chairs while I'm setting up my tent, or they sit down and have dinner on there, or just chill out. I found that really helps them chill out, and they got their little sense of space. And even sitting and cooking a few marshmallows in the fire, you can set the chair to a destination where it is safe for them to sit away, and it's easy to have a bit of control over when they're all setting up where you're setting up your campsite. They can sort of sit there and play with their toys, or watch, or keep them in a spot where you can supervise them safely. Mattresses, I would rather use. I've got a self-inflated mattress that rolls up quite tight. After a lot of research and whatnot I've done over the years, and different things I've slept on, I found that was probably the best for myself, because it folds up nicely. It doesn't transfer the cold from the floor of the tent to your body, and also it is quite durable, and it's quite easy to set up and pack up when you go to site. A lot of them are quite bulky, do require pumps. A lot of them do require a lot of room to store, and some of them are pretty unresilient to weather conditions, depending on what goes on. Like, you really do feel the cold from the ground into your back of your body. That's always another thing to look into. That's another show I'll probably do a bit more in detail one day. And sleeping bag, always go to the sleeping bag. So if you're going to Vic High Country in winter, highly recommend a -5, -10 sleeping bag, as it does get quite cold. I started off with a -3 rated sleeping bag and one of those polyester ones, and by 3 o'clock in the morning I looked like sunk off Cool Runnings with every piece of clothing on, freezing my butt off, and it was not an enjoyable trip, which would have been pretty good in summer, but in winter it just wasn't my thing. Right now I've got a -10 rated sleeping bag. My kids have got -3. And for those 0, even the 2 degree, 3 degree nights, they're quite comfortable in their pajamas, not having to rug up. And I got the poly cotton canvas ones where they don't sort of rustle up and wake up the kids at night. They feel very comfortable, like it's a doona at home. Same for me. I didn't personally like that polyester feel. Yes, they pack up really nice and tight, and they're small. They're good for hiking, but for camping, preferably I like something thicker, like a doona at home. Feels like home. So I guess it's, especially when you're going with the kids, you want to make them feel like they're at home, so they're comfortable out, and A, enjoy it, B, want to go out again, and C, have a good night's sleep, so you're not up all night and stressing about it. Swag and tent, it comes down to personal choice. I see it as the cheaper you go, the longer it's going to take to set up and maybe not handle all the conditions. In the more expensive you go, yes, you can probably have a quicker setup, but there's always a compensation for anything you go for in terms of the tent. There's a lot of Coleman tents out there, the 10-man tents that are quite roomy and quite substantial and quite can handle any conditions for a pretty good price. And then there's more expensive ones like the Oz tents that instantly set up, but they're a 2.5 meter by 2.5 meter room, and you got to fit 4 people in there, plus your stuff and plus your sleeping gear. It does get quite cramped. Personally, I found one off Marketplace for a couple $100, and it's a 2-man tent, dome tent. I mean, a 2-bedroom dome tent that pops up instantly in the front, and then the rear room's held up by a pole. It takes me about 4.5 minutes to set up by myself. Poly cotton canvas, fantastic tent. The kids can play in the front room and sleep in the back room. When it rains, you can set up pretty much a whole room to compensate for not being outside, and not have to move your sleeping stuff around and get that all wet and dirty from a day's playing outside. In terms of chairs and tables, I've got just like a picnic table and chairs that fold into the table. The chairs fold out separately, so we have our lunches and dinners and breakfasts on that, and do our board games and play. They do their colouring in while they're playing there. And at the meantime, we do it's like a family table for home, but not away from home in a sense. I also take that when we go picnics. Sometimes the picnic tables are all taken, and you've got that always ready to go. That's worked out pretty well for us. And also on top of that, I probably at a bonus, I probably get one of those 3x3 meter gazebos you see in all common shops. If it's going to be rainy, if it's going to be a hot day, you got somewhere to sit outside, but under a good substantial amount of shelter. I've got a Oz Trail gazebo that's got the lining inside for the sun, and if it's a 30-degree day, you can shelter under that, and it can withstand a fair bit of wind when you tie it down properly. Put in a wall on it to shelter yourself from the sun, and that it's an extra 9 square meters of shelter that a tent can't give you. For a small investment to put on strap on your roof or put on your tent, it is quite versatile, and you can fit families down. When we've gone camping with friends, we've pretty much had Gazebo City, where you nearly had 4 to 5 of them all set up, and it was pretty good, especially when it rained. We're all sheltered, we're all dry, obviously. It was an extra point of shelter, especially to get out of the weather conditions, and that sun today in Melbourne and all around Australia is quite substantial. So do highly recommend looking at those items, and especially when you go solo, you can put your swag under it with your table and barbecue and stove and chairs, and you can have that as your base camp and go venturing for the day, come back to your base camp and it's all set up. That's been quite versatile for both sides camping, and I definitely would recommend that. My number 4 item is I got the fire equipment that I normally keep for both in a box. And that's your matches, your fire starters, your marshmallow sticks for the kids when they want to cook their marshmallows. I keep some wood and kindling enough to make a small fire for the night. Depends if you want to make a big bonfire, you have to go search for wood, cut it with chainsaws, or be a team to gather all the firewood, spend a couple of hours doing it, which is worthwhile. Or you can just bring some firewood from Servo or Bunnings and bring it out and put in the fire pit provided, or get a small fire pit to have that little extra for the kids, or do some cooking. Regardless, it's always good to have that equipment, especially if it's cold, you need to start a fire, or when you go solo camping, it's quite common that you set up camp, set up a fire, do some cooking with it with the Dutch oven, or just even sit around it, have a chat. That's always been a good pastime, and it's one of the best things about camping is outdoor TV, as some people call it. So I would do recommend having that in a container that's waterproof, and you can transfer between. Obviously, keep it locked up away from the kids depending on the situation, and it works out quite well, especially if your stove fails. You've got this fire lighting gear to light the stove, and also have it as a backup for camp cooking. My number 5 would be first aid kit, and just sort of preparation for any situation when it comes to an emergency. I have a first aid kit. I keep my Hydralyte, Panadol, Nurofen, medication depending on the situation, especially if your kids have got asthma. It's always good to probably carry an emergency puffer. You got the all your kit there, so if it is a hot day and you get dehydrated, you've got the Hydralyte to help with the kids, especially if they get a sore tummy when they're traveling. You got this for yourself if you're a bit dehydrated, being in the sun all day, especially in the cold. You got like a hypothermia blanket just in case you do, the event that occurs. If you want to get a snake bite kit. I know plenty of people that travel with those, and people say you do need it, but don't need it, but you only need it. You need it when you need it. It's an insurance policy, and you can even go, if you're going off grid, you can get some of those. Personal GME make a GPS system, so there's an emergency, you press a button, has all your medical details on it, so it does call the authorities when you don't have mobile reception. And that is a common occurrence when you travel between cities, or going in bush, or going in the mountains. You can get in that occurrence where you do need an emergency situation, you've got no reception. Telstra is only good to a certain extent. The other networks are probably not as good in terms of being out in the country, but it does probably pay to spend some good money to have that insurance policy, particularly if your kids or yourself have a medical condition that does require urgent attention. It's just something to think about. Yes, it's all adding up money, but it's better off having a good time, being safe, and being vigilant out there these days, because anything can happen. It's you got to factor in everything really these days. On top of that, one of the top 5 that I thought about, I believe that also having an esky, having a fridge in the car, depending on your situation, if you got an extra battery or whatnot, but just getting an esky with some ice, one of those ice boxes. Have a couple of bags of ice. If you're going remote, you can get an ice box, and that ice should last a couple of days, or even just an esky and just go into town and support the locals and buy a bag of ice every couple of days or whatever it takes to keep your food cold, especially if you're carrying meat and chicken. You want to keep that at a suited temperature to make sure that you don't get sick. I carry, on top of that, I probably even think about carrying a food thermometer. I carry mine just to make sure that the chicken's cooked, because the last thing you want to do is undercook chicken and have a sore tummy, especially with the kids. They're quite sensitive to that, especially if you're outdoors. It's not the same at home where you can overcook it and you're not watching. Sometimes when you're camping, you be watching the kids, you're cooking at the same time, you sort of forget, it looks burnt, but it's inside, it's still pink. Having a thermometer to just stick in your chicken, make sure it's up to temperature. Especially in your lamb and Dutch oven, you want to burn it. You want to make sure it's good. 58 degrees is a great temperature, by the way, internally for a good cooked lamb. You want to make sure that your food's cooked, and where you're storing your food is also actually to the refrigerator temp that it requires, because once you have off food, it sort of ruins your trip. In saying that as well, having a waterproof box for your pantry for your food, your snacks. Being prepared, having snacks in the car and in the car when you're traveling, but also in the boot when you at your destination, also has a great priority, because keeping your food fresh and dry, also your bread doesn't go moldy or off, and you have your fresh food when you're traveling, and your fresh fruit and veggies and whatnot. Having everything fresh is vital, I believe, to having a good trip, not getting sick and having to cut it short because of a sore stomach, whether it be the family or yourself. That's probably the 5 things that I would carry, have in my pack. I could even put it down on the list and put in a checklist for you guys and send it out to you. If you want that, you can send me an email at info@outpack.com.au, and that's spelled OUTPACK. We are also on the socials as well, on Facebook and Instagram, facebook.com and instagram.com/Outpack Podcast. And you can reach me there, send me a review, send me some feedback on today's episode. I plan to release 3 at the same time to see how we go. I look forward to hearing what you guys believe is are good for to keep between solo and family pack camping at all times in your storage area. I'd like to hear what you guys say. And no, it's been a pleasure to host my first episode. It's a bit nerve-wracking a little bit. This is my, 17th try, but I got there. So I look forward to further episodes up ahead. Thank you for listening. So hit that subscribe, leave me a review. I look forward to hearing all your honest advice, because I'll be giving honest advice back to everybody as well. And have a great day. Cheers.